Have you ever been in front of something that seemed too old to belong in history? Something that it's not explained, it's just felt. In Ollantaytambo, in the heart of the Andes, there are stones that do not count dates. They keep silence. Silence is so dense that they span centuries and now land on you. Before being a ruin, temple or fortress, Ollantaytambo is a question asked in stone, raised against the sky, lined with mountains that seem to watch over time. Who put that there? And perhaps more disturbingly, why? The giant wall shouts answers. She waits. Civilizations are born, grow and disappear. Empires turn to dust. Names are lost. But some buildings remain as if they were left yesterday, defying wear, forgetfulness, and logic itself. Ollantaytambo is one of those presences that they don't age. She watches. She resists. She remembers. There are those who say that everything can be explained with simple tools, human strength and persistence. But when you look at those colossal blocks fitted together with precision almost impossible, something inside you hesitates. It's not skepticism. It's intuition. A whisper internal saying that history, sometimes, only tells us what it can understand. This is not a video about rocks. It's about memory. About knowledge that perhaps has been forgotten, deleted, or simply silenced. It's about the strange feeling to realize that the past may have been more advanced, more conscious, deeper than we were taught to believe. If you feel like certain things are no coincidence, maybe this video is just the thing that you needed to hear right now. Stay here, breathe, observe calmly, because when trying to understand Ollantaytambo, perhaps the real mystery is not in the stones, but in that they awaken within us. There is a silent call in this place, like an echo that passes through generations and touches those who is willing to listen. It does not require belief, just presence. The more we try to reduce the mystery, the more it expands. Perhaps because certain works were not meant to be deciphered quickly, but contemplated slowly. Here, science and spirituality are not they fight. They talk. Reason measures, the soul feels. And between one measure and another, the fertile discomfort of big questions, those that do not ask for immediate answers, just the courage to keep looking. It is in this open space that the wall remains, intact, remembering that not everything came to be resolved, but to be, felt in silence, deep, ancient, human, attentive, humble, present. There are places that exist on the map, but do not fit on the calendar. Ollantaytambo is like that. Officially, an Inca site. Didactically, a fortress, a ceremonial center, a point strategic. But when you walk among its stones, something doesn't fit. It's not just big. It's necessary. Too precise for the simple narrative that usually accompany him. The guides talk about centuries. The plaques speak of dates. The books talk about a people extraordinary. All of this is true, and still insufficient, because what lies ahead of you seems to have been built out of human haste, out of improvisation, out of error. Each block seems to know exactly where it should be, as if it has been remembered, not placed. Ollantaytambo is not an improvised place. It reveals planning on a scale that defies the historical context assigned to it. The alignments with the mountains, the control from the water, the terraces that dominate the relief, with almost mathematical elegance. Nothing there suggests trial and error. Everything suggests dominance. And here the first real discomfort arises. If it was just an Inca administrative center, why that such sophistication in a specific point, while other constructions of the same period present much simpler solutions? Why concentrate so much knowledge, so much precision, in a single location? History responds with practical functions. The intuition asks for something more. There is a persistent feeling that Ollantaytambo did not begin with the Incas. How if they had inherited something already ready, already ancient, already powerful? Many archaeologists avoid this hypothesis, not because of a lack of curiosity, but because it opens too many doors, ports that lead to difficult questions to answer later. When we compare the most refined parts of the site with others that are clearly Inca, the difference is obvious. It's like observing two architectural languages coexisting in the same space. One more functional, the other almost impossible. One adapted to the terrain, another imposing order on natural chaos. This does not mean denying the Inca genius. On the contrary, it also means recognizing them as heirs, guardians of previous knowledge. Intelligent people know how to recognize value of what they find, and perhaps they chose to preserve, use, and revere what they didn't know how to reproduce completely. Time, here, does not flow linearly. He bends. Past and present seem coexist on the same stones. Don't you feel sorry as looking back? Sit that is being watched back, as if the place asks who you are, not what you are contrary. Ollantaytambo resists quick explanations because he belongs to a higher layer, depth of human experience, one where history, memory, and meaning mix, where the question is not just when it was done, but by what consciousness. And perhaps that's exactly what makes it so disturbing, because if we accept that there were advanced chapters before, the ones we know, we need to review our line of inner time. We need to admit that progress is not a continuous ladder, but a fragile cycle, subject to forgetfulness. The place where time does not explain is also the place where the mind slows down. Where are we invited to observe without concluding, to remain in the mystery without trying to dominate it? Because some truths are not revealed to those who run, only to those who remain. And Ollantaytambo remains, intact, silent, waiting for the right question to be asked. Perhaps for this reason, scholars and travelers return to this valley with the feeling that something it remained unfinished within them. Not information, but perception. As if the place activate a memory that is not personal, but collective. A memory of the species prior to names, dates, borders. Faced with these stones, human beings do not. It feels primitive. It feels forgotten. Forgetful of abilities that were once natural. Forgotten after falls, catastrophes, or choices. Ollantaytambo does not accuse, does not teach, does not explain. It only exists as silent proof that history can be more deeper than books allow. And as you watch, something slowly changes. The need for immediate responses loses strength. In its place comes respect. A respect almost reverent for what survived when so many certainties collapsed. Maybe this is the true purpose of the place, not to impress the eyes, but to mature the question. Because when the question matures, consciousness expands, and with it, the provision to continue the journey without guarantees, guided only by the intuition that there is much more to remember than to discover. And this reminder does not come in the form of a response, but of silence. A silence that asks listening, humility, and time. Maybe that's why some mysteries can't be solved. They just follow. They walk with us, transforming the way we see the world past and, above all, how we imagine the human future. Thus, the valley remains as a discreet master, teaching without words that remembering can be more revolutionary than what to invent, and that the true human heritage may be deep, ancient, alive, shared. The Ollantaytambo wall is not imposed by its height, but by its impossibility. Each block it seems to carry not just weight but intention. Some reach tens of tons, extracted from distant quarries, crossing valleys, rivers, and gaps that still exist today challenge modern engineering. To look at this wall is to confront a simple and uncomfortable. Something here doesn't match what we've learned about ancient boundaries. Blocks are not stacked. They are fitted, adjusted with such fine precision that not even a blade finds space between the joints. There is no mortar. There is no slack. There is no visible error. Stone meets stone as if they were both shaped to that specific encounter. This requires more than strength. Requires planning, three-dimensional, anticipatory vision, absolute mastery of the material. The traditional explanation speaks of ropes, ramps, levers, and collective effort. But when we analyze the real terrain, the distance from the quarries and the exact weight of the rocks, this narrative begins to creak. It doesn't crumble, but it creaks, because it doesn't respond to everything, mainly in terms of final finishing, something that goes beyond transportation and enters the field of advanced cutting. The surfaces are too flat, the angles too complex. Some blocks have internal cuts, fittings, and multiple planes, as if they were pieces of a puzzle three-dimensional. It's not the kind of work that can be improvised on a construction site. He demands prior calculation, repetition of method, knowledge that is transmitted with precision. The engineering problem is not just how to move, but how to cut. The rocks used, such as andesite, are hard, resistant, and unfriendly to tools simple. Even so, they present finishes that resemble controlled polishing, not gross impact. Where are the error marks? Where are the dropped blocks? Where is the trail of learning? In great human works, we see attempts, failures, adjustments. In Ollantaytambo, we see conclusion, as if whoever built it already knew exactly what they were doing from the beginning. Start. This suggests tradition, not experiment. It suggests a lineage of knowledge, not a one-off discovery. Modern engineers analyzing the site do not deny the human possibility. What they question is the method, all. Because even today, moving and fitting stones of this size, it would require heavy machinery, digital planning, and highly specialized teams. The question stops being if it was done and becomes with what level of technical awareness. And then there is silence. There are no written records detailing the process. There is no preserved tools that explain the finish. There is no clear transition between the rudimentary and sophisticated. Just the end result. Like a sentence without a draft. This is the point where engineering touches something bigger, because when the technique surpasses the A's expected, it approaches philosophy. It reveals how a culture relates to matter, if the stone was an obstacle or language, whether the weight was a problem or a dialogue. Perhaps the wall was not designed just to resist but to teach, for show that matter responds to mind when the mind is trained, patient, and integrated to the environment. There is no rush there. There is mastery of time, effort, and form. The engineering problem, then, is not technical. It's conceptual. We are trying to understand an old work with a fragmented mentality, when perhaps it was created from an integrated vision, where science, spirituality, and nature were not separated. The wall remains as physical proof of an open question. It requires no belief, just honest observation. Something was done here with a level of intent that has not yet we were able to fully reproduce. And as we try to reduce the feet to tools simple, perhaps we are losing the essential thing, the conscience that guided each cut. The true weight of these stones is not in the tons, but in what they carry symbolically. They support the idea that the past may have been more skillful than what we assume, and that engineering, when born from a mind aligned with the whole, leaves marks that time cannot erase. In the end, the wall doesn't just defy physics. It challenges our willingness to accept that there was deep knowing before us. One knowing it didn't disappear. He just stayed quiet, waiting to be recognized again. There is a detail in Ollantaytambo that disturbs more than the size of the stones or the accuracy of fittings. It's what's not there. There are no tools. There are no clear remains of the process. There are no evident marks of trial, error, or correction. It's a technical silence that echoes as loud as the wall itself. In any great human work, the path is usually recorded. Tools broken, irregular, marks, abandoned surfaces, signs of learning happening in real time. In Ollantaytambo, this trail simply does not exist. The stones seem to have reached their final state without hesitation, as if the hand that molded already knew the result even before the first cut. The visible marks do not resemble gross impacts. They don't look like the result of blows repeated or uncontrolled wear. They are smooth, continuous, almost organic. Some surfaces give the impression of having been softened, not beaten. This doesn't mean futuristic or impossible technology. It just means that the method does not fit the simple tools that we usually imagine. Where are the hammers? Where are the chisels? Where are the discarded chips in large quantity? Absence does not prove anything alone, but it provokes. Because when something disappears completely, it is not casual forgetfulness. It's a structural gap. There is also the issue of repetition. The same accuracy pattern appears in different blocks, at different points on the site. This indicates standardization. Standardization requires method stable, a method that can be taught, reproduced, maintained. It's not built like that only with improvisation and collective strength. It is built with transmitted knowledge. Some researchers suggest that the tools were made of perishable materials, wood, fibers, elements that time has erased. Others talk about abrasive techniques, use of sand, water, extreme patience. All of this is possible, but, again, it doesn't completely explain the level of control obtained, especially in internal cuts and compound angles. The silence of the tools is also the silence of the records. Ancient cultures recorded important achievements. They sang victories, narrated battles, celebrated kings. But about the Ollantaytambo's most impressive construction process, there are only echoes, nothing detailed, nothing technical, as if knowledge were not public, but reserved. This leads us to an uncomfortable hypothesis. What if the knowledge involved was not for everyone? What if it were kept, transmitted only to a few? Not out of arrogance, but out of responsibility. Because certain knowledge, when misunderstood, is lost or are distorted. In many ancient traditions, technical knowledge went hand in hand with spiritual knowledge. No, it was taught only how to do it, but when, why, and with what inner state. The main tool was not the object in the hand, but the mind that guided it. If this is true, then silence does not, it is absence. It's choice. Perhaps the most important tools left no trace because they were not external. Perhaps the method involved rhythm, sound, repetition, sensitivity to the material, one deep listening to the stone, something difficult to catalog, impossible to fossilize. This does not diminish the achievement. On the contrary, elevate, because it suggests a relationship with matter which is not one of domination, but of cooperation. The stone was not defeated. She was convinced. Modern discomfort comes from our dependence on objects. When we don't see machines, we assume ignorance. But what if we are confusing apparent simplicity with real sophistication? And if the absence of visible tools is precisely the sign of a more refined, less noisy knowledge? The silence of the tools forces us to look inside, questioning our own assumptions about progress, technology, and intelligence. Perhaps we have advanced in potency, but retreated in perception. Maybe we know how to move more weight but listen less. Ollantaytambo doesn't respond. He watches. Watch our attempts to fit it into known models, and it remains outside of them, as a reminder that not all knowledge leaves material marks. Some leave only results, and these results go through time without a clear explanation, not because they are supernatural, but because they belong to a way of thinking that we have forgotten. One way where technique and consciousness were not separated, where building was a complete act, internal and external. The silence of the tools is, in essence, an invitation to hear what was not said, to respect what was not recorded, to accept that the past may have operated at frequencies different from ours, and that understanding this requires less affirmation and more listening. Perhaps, when we learn to listen again, some answers will emerge not in vain words, but in intuitions, and in that moment, silence will no longer be empty. It will become ancient language waiting for patience to be understood. When we look at Ollantaytambo in isolation, it already defies explanation. But when we put it in dialogue with other places in the world, something even deeper happens. The stones start talking to each other, and what they say doesn't belong to just one culture, not at a single time. On continents separated by oceans, structures arise that share the same silent language. Megalithic blocks, precise fittings, absence of mortar, extreme durability. From the walls of Sacsayhuaman to the platforms of Baalbek, from the temples of Göbekli Tepe to the Cyclopean constructions of Egypt, the pattern repeats itself, not in form, but in intention. This raises an unsettling possibility. What if these civilizations weren't so isolated? How much do we imagine? Not by direct physical contact, but by inheritance, a legacy of principles, understanding the subject, relating to the environment, a knowledge that survived falls, floods, socials, collapses, knowledge that was passed on, fragmented, adapted, but never completely lost. Stone, in this context, is no longer just a material. It becomes an archive. Different from paper, it does not burn easily. Unlike oral memory, it is not distorted by time. It keeps shape, keep intention, save method. Ollantaytambo is not just a construction. It's a solid record of a way of thinking. In many ancient traditions, matter was believed to have memory, that everything that it is shaped with, conscience, and carries that mark. Not as naive mysticism, but as deep observation. An attentive craftsman realizes that the material responds to the state of who works it. Haste breeds failure. Attention generates precision. Maybe that's why these works survive. not just for the technique but for the quality of the attention involved in its creation, an attention that did not fragment the world into physical and spiritual, who understood construction as a total act, involving mind, body, and purpose. Ancestral knowledge was rarely cumulative in the modern sense. It was cyclical. It appeared, flourished, was partially lost, and returned. Each cycle left marks. Ollantaytambo could be one of those brands, a vestige of a previous apex, not officially recognized because it does not fit into the progressive line we prefer to count. This idea is uncomfortable because it displaces modern human beings from the center of the narrative, suggests that we are not the highest point in history, but a crossing point, that already we knew things we forgot. And that part of our discomfort comes from this amnesia collective. The Incas, it seems, understood this. They didn't try to erase what found. They integrated. They adapted. They revered. They recognized that some stones came from before, from a time that didn't need to be dominated, just respected. The memory of the stone does not scream absolute truths. She whispers continuity. She says that the humanity hasn't started from scratch as often as we think, that there were lines of knowledge that attracts ages past even when the civilizations that sustained them disappeared. Perhaps the modern mistake is to demand evidence in the wrong format. We expect texts, dates, names, but the past left other languages that require observation, slow, broad comparison, and intellectual humility. When we place Ollantaytambo alongside other megalithic sites, we are not affirming a single global civilization. We are recognizing something more subtle, principles shared, a similar understanding of weight, balance, fit, durability, a common way of dialoguing with the stone. This is not learned by chance. This is inherited, even partially, even if distorted, even if incomplete. The memory of the stone is fragmented but persistent. She survives where words fail. Maybe that's why these places awaken something deep in whoever visits them. No just intellectual curiosity, but recognition, as if something inside us remember, before understanding, as if the stone activated a memory that is not individual, but human. Ollantaytambo then ceases to be an isolated mystery. It becomes a node in a network old, a knowledge network that has weathered collapses, climate change, migrations, and oblivion. A network that does not need to be romanticized, just considered. The question is no longer whether this knowledge existed. The stones show that, yes. The question, it's because we forget it. And most importantly, what happens when we start to remember? Perhaps Ollantaytambo's true legacy is not the wall that stands, but the silent reminder that we were once capable of thinking in an integrated way, and that this capacity has not died, just fell asleep, waiting for the right moment to be recognized again, not as a glorious past, but as a present possibility, alive, human, conscious. After observing the stone, its weight, its fit, and its silence, an inevitable question arises. What if the most important thing is not the method but the mind that conceived it? In Ollantaytambo, engineering seems to be just the surface of something deeper, as if each block was a consequence of a specific consciousness, not just a technique. Building that way requires more than mechanical knowledge. It requires vision, demands patience. It requires a different relationship with time. Nothing there suggests urgency. There is no shortcuts. There are no improvised solutions. There is intention sustained over generations, something rare at any time. When we analyze the work only as a physical challenge, we miss the essential point, because the true sophistication may not lie in the tools, but in the collective state of mind that allowed that construction. A culture capable of coordinating effort, purpose, and precision without fragmenting the process into isolated parts. Today we tend to separate everything. Science of spirituality, meaning technique, work of meaning. Perhaps that is why it is so difficult to understand works that were born from a vision integrated. For those builders, building a wall wasn't just about solving a problem, structural problem. It was aligning yourself with the environment, with the moment, with something bigger. The mountains around Ollantaytambo don't seem chosen at random. They participate in the composition. The valley was not dominated. It was listened to. The water was conveyed with respect for the natural flow. Everything indicates a conscience that observed. before acting. But he understood the territory as a partner, not as an obstacle. This changes everything, because when the construction is born from this type of perception, it stops just being functional. It becomes symbolic. A mirror of one's internal state builds, an invisible signature left on matter. Maybe that's why these structures resist so much, not just for the technique, but for the coherence. When something is created without internal conflict, it sustains itself better, does not load unnecessary tension. It is not born of haste or fear. It is born from alignment. This type of consciousness does not arise spontaneously. It is cultivated, taught, transmitted. And this leads us to imagine societies where learning was not limited to practical skills but included mental discipline, mindfulness, respect for natural rhythm, an education of being, not just doing. Ollantaytambo could be the end result of this type of formation, a place where architecture reveals a worldview, where the stone expresses values, where the precision, it is not vanity but consequence. If something inside you is awakening while listening to this, stay until the end. The answer may be here, not as a technical explanation, but as an internal recognition. Because this type of construction does not just speak to the intellect, it speaks to deep memory. Perhaps the biggest modern mistake is to think that consciousness is something too abstract to leave physical marks. Ollantaytambo proves the opposite. Consciousness shapes matter when there is sufficient time, intention, and continuity. It forces us to look at ourselves, for the way we build our cities, our relays actions, our lives, everything fast, disposable, fragmented. Little remains, little resists. Not because of a lack of technology, but because of a lack of alignment. The consciousness behind construction cannot be measured in tons or cubic meters. She notices herself in the sensation that the place provokes, in quiet, strangeness, in respect silent, in the impression that something there is alive, attentive, present. Perhaps these works were created to last longer than the civilizations that created them, raised, like milestones, like reminders, as anchors of a way of thinking that it shouldn't be lost completely. When technique separates from consciousness, it becomes powerful but unstable. When the two go hand in hand, creating works that span millennia. Ollantaytambo is a of these rare manifestations. We don't need to idealize the past, but we need to recognize that there were times when that human beings built from a more integrated center. And maybe the real advancement is not about inventing something totally new, but about recovering that center. The consciousness behind construction is, in essence, the consciousness behind existence, the one who observes before acting, who feels before imposing, who understands before acting, modify. When this consciousness returns, even partially, something reorganizes. Perhaps the mystery of Ollantaytambo is not an enigma to be solved, but a state to be remembered, a silent invitation to reconstruct not just theories about the past, but the quality of attention with which we shape the present. Ollantaytambo, like many other ancient places, awakens a curious sensation. It's not just the fascination with the grandeur of the constructions or the precision of the blocks. It's something more deeper, more intimate, something that, when looking more closely, makes us question, what if at the same time observing these ancient monuments we are also looking inside ourselves same? There is a unique quality to this type of construction, an almost invisible power that transcends the material. These stones are not just parts of a fortress or a temple. They are reflections of something much greater, something that resides in the human soul. They talk about a wisdom that has been forgotten and perhaps of a potential that we still carry, but not we recognize. The giant wall of Ollantaytambo, with its precision and serenity, is a mirror. She reflects our relationship with time, with effort, with consciousness. When we come across it, the feeling of being faced with something impossible to replicate in our confronts our own limitations. But at the same time, it challenges us to look more deeply, to question what we are capable of doing when our mind, our body, and our soul are aligned. When we look at the past, we often see it as a straight line of progress, with ancient people being just intermediate steps between us and a more advanced. But Ollantaytambo asks us to rethink this vision. And if progress was linear, What if, instead of constantly moving forward, we went through cycles of rise and fall, of forgetting and remembering? The reflection that Ollantaytambo offers us is that of a human being capable of a conscious, deep, and integrated. This view of the past challenges the idea that we are the pinnacle of civilization. On the contrary, it suggests that there is something in us that has been lost, something that we need to recover. Perhaps the true measure of advancement is not technological, but spiritual, emotional, and mental. It is this type of evolution that Ollantaytambo points out to us. As we contemplate the blocks, stones, and terraces, we realize that we are in front of something more than a simple physical construction. We are facing a symbol of humanity in its entirety. The precision of the cuts, the harmony with the environment, the relationship with time, all of this reflects what we are capable of doing when we connect with our deepest essence. The great mystery is not in the stones, but in the human capacity to transcend physical limits to create something that lasts in the time. Looking at these constructions, we are reminded that greatness is not measured not only by what we do, but by the quality of the intention with which we do it. Ollantaytambo was not just erected to become a monument to power or religion. He was created with the understanding that true strength lies in the balance between physical and spiritual, in respect for natural forces, and in a deep understanding of who we are and our connection to the world around us. Every stone, every block, every socket is a reminder that we are, in a way, what we build, but we are also what we are capable of dreaming, imagining, transcend. The work that made Ollantaytambo a marvel was not just manual, but mental and spiritual. He speaks not only of human dexterity, but of the ability to create with conscience, to build something that not only stands the test of time, but that also wakes us up. The great mirror of Ollantaytambo is not just physical. He invites us to reflect on ourselves, to question what prevents us from achieving a deeper understanding of our own potential. What are we building in our lives, in our communities, in our relationships? We are building with the same intention of harmony and balance that we see in the stones of Ollantaytambo, or are we creating only with the intention of filling spaces, of satisfying immediate and superficial? This mirror also invites us to look to the future. When we look at the modern societies and the path we are following, the question arises, are we heading in the right direction? We are creating with conscience, with respect, with deep understanding of our connection with the world and with future generations. Or are we just creating in response to consumption, haste, and superficiality? The human mirror that Ollantaytambo offers us does not just show us what we were. He shows us what we can be. He challenges us to recover a way of seeing the world, to relate to matter and time, which we have forgotten. He reminds us of that when we build with intention, with presence and with respect, what we create can be eternal. The grandeur of Ollantaytambo is not only visible in the stones that remain, she is in the consciousness of those who created them, and now, in the consciousness they awaken in us. How we look at it, we also look inside ourselves, at what we are, and at what we can still be. There is a moment in front of Ollantaytambo when the mind gets tired of looking for answers. Theories have already been considered. The hypotheses are heavy. The comparisons made. And then something different happens. An internal silence settles, not as absence, but as a presence. It is there that the mystery begins to fulfill its true role. Perhaps these stones were never lifted to be fully explained. Maybe have been left as markers of remembrance, not of completion, as if to say, without words, that humanity has already walked deeper paths than remember, and that forgetting is not the end of the story, just a pause that is too long. Ollantaytambo does not require you to believe in anything extraordinary. It just remains, and in that permanence, it invites you to slow down, watching without rushing, to accept that not everything needs to be reduced to a method or a date. Some truths are only revealed when we stop squeezing them with excessive logic. Along this path, we have seen that the giant wall is not just a technical challenge. It's a mirror, a reminder that human consciousness, when integrated, is capable of feats that span millennia, not by brute force but by alignment, not for domination, but by listening. Perhaps the biggest mystery is not how those stones got there, but why today it seems so difficult to imagine someone doing that without machines. without rushing, without fragmentation. The discomfort we feel says more about us than about them, says about how much we move away from certain states of attention. The past is not dead. It vibrates in the structures that resist, in the symbols that return, in the questions that insist on not disappearing. Ollantaytambo is one of those persistent vibrations, a point where time doesn't erase, it just observes. What if what we call advancement made us forget something essential? And if the real evolution is not about accumulating more tools, but about recovering the quality of presence with do we use any tool? This is a question that does not belong to archaeology, but to everyday life. Each of us builds something every day. Thoughts, relations, decisions, worlds internal. The silent question that Ollantaytambo leaves is not about stones, but about intention. With what inner state are we building what will remain after us? Maybe that's why this place remains without a definitive explanation, because he doesn't want to be resolved. You want to be remembered. You want to activate something dormant, a memory that is not individual, but human, a reminder that we were once capable of more integration, more depth, more listening. If this message touched something for you, subscribe and follow us. Your soul may be remembering the path, not to return to the past, but to rescue, in the present, what that should never have been lost. Ollantaytambo remains, not as a ruin, but as a witness. Witness that the human history may be broader, richer, and more mysterious than we have been told. And perhaps what we call the end, the limit of explanation, is just the beginning of a memory that the soul has not yet forgotten.